Hi, thanks for coming and welcome to my 5 questions about the origin of the Night Stalkers series. So we're going to jump right in, but I will warn you this may have some spoilers. So why did I write about the Night Stalkers? Well, what happened was I was writing a different book and I needed this crazy helicopter to come and rescue my hero. So I went out searching for crazy helicopters and I stumbled on this absolutely amazing helicopter that was decades ahead of its time, called the Comanche RAH-66. However, only two of them were ever built. And the reason is because they came up with this great airframe and all this new technology, and it was stealth, and it broke a lot of barriers. And then what happened was the powers that be said, hey, let's add more tools to it. Let's add more capability. Until finally the thing was basically so heavy it couldn't fly. And then they went, oh, well, this is too expensive because of all the stuff you added, and they killed the program. But in the process, I had them build a third one that my heroine played with, but that's a different book. Along the way of researching this, I discovered a group called the Night Stalkers, which are a real-life group, part of the U.S. Army, the 160th SOAR Regiment, that Special Operations Aviation Regiment Airborne. These are the guys who flew into bin Laden's compound. They have done thousands of missions, most of which we never have heard of and never will hear of. They were also the helicopters in Black Hawk Down. Again, the Night Stalkers says they're specialized at night, and the commander sent them out at noon. Into a very dangerous zone, and of course there was trouble. Oh well. But what happened was, being a guy, I had to go look at the application and see if I would have qualified back in the day. The answer's hell no. But I'd been looking for fresh ideas. I've been looking for, like, the subgenre of romantic suspense came about because someone took detectives and made a female detective and turned that into the basis of romance. And then along came Suzanne Brockman, who said, oh, romantic suspense and cool, SEALs. So she created an entire military romantic suspense genre herself, personally. And I was interested in that, and suddenly I'm reading this application, and this is back in 2006, and the second line of the application, first one was name, was women may not apply. And this is before women were integrated into forward operations in the U.S. military. And it was like, there was my idea. The woman who was so good, they couldn't keep her out. Suddenly I had this new idea, and I was going to write the Night Stalker. So that's how I came upon writing this series. Who are they? Okay, these guys came out of Desert One. For those of you who aren't geeks or my age, Desert One was around 1979, 1980. The Iranian people overthrew the Shah, chased him out of Iran, and in the process captured a couple hundred civilians, U.S. civilians, and kept them prisoner for 250 days or something like that. And we came up with the idea of a rescue mission. Let's fly in helicopters in the dead of night. These guys aren't skilled enough to pick us up. And let's get in there and rescue our people and get back out. We built all sorts of special equipment, tested sorts of things, but everybody wanted in. So the Navy, who had no practice flying over land, they are very good at flying over water, ended up deciding they would do the helicopter part. So they flew into dust storms with machines that weren't rigged to deal with it, and some had to turn back, some effectively crashed on landing. They had just enough to, and then one broke. So they landed in the desert in the middle of Iran, hundreds of miles from any rescue, and they decide they better fly back. So give up and fly back. So one of the helicopters gets up, which creates this huge brownout of dust, which the Navy doesn't know what to do with, and they start flying forward to get up close to one of the big C-130 transport tankers so they can refuel for the flight back. Well, they run into the tanker. Explosions happen, deaths happen. They decide to abandon all the helicopters and the burning tanker, and they all leave. So this absolute disaster, completely embarrassing. And somebody afterwards said, we can't do this again. We have to have a force that specializes in counterterrorism and these really tricky night operations. And that was the birth of the 160th SOAR. And it's a lot more complex than that, but that's the gist of it. Their first big mission was flying into Grenada, where we went in and rescued a bunch of our students and people and journalists in prison and stopped the overthrow of a government. And it was a major operation, and the Night Stalkers did things nobody'd ever seen before, the kind of operations nobody'd seen before. So over each of the wars, these guys got better and better at what they do, and they flew in. They're the helicopters that went into Bin Laden's compound. Again, if you read the news and followed that event, one of the helicopters crashed there. Well, the reason it crashed was the powers that be overloaded the crap out of this machine because it was a stealth machine that had never been used in heavy operations. And they said, no, it should be this. And they said, no, it's this. And it got inside that compound and it just lost lift and went bonk. And in the process, hung up its tail. They were pretty sure they could have flown it out, but they didn't want to risk it, so they blew it up in place. What the Night Stalkers do is they take the absolute elite special operations forces like Delta Force, 75th Rangers, and DevGru, more commonly and incorrectly known as SEAL Team 6, and they fly them in and out of hard access areas. And one of their things is they do it within 30 seconds of when they say they will. So we're going to drop you 200 miles behind enemy lines. All hell breaks loose while you're in doing your operation. We're going to come back within 30 seconds of when we said we were going to pull you back out. And we'll be there and we'll get you back out. And they do that. They're absolutely amazing. So how do you go about researching a secret helicopter regiment? And there are a couple books. It's not like the SEALs where every SEAL had to write a memoir. These guys tend to keep their mouths shut. But Black Hawk Down was so visible and so exposed that it generated a couple books. So I read those books. I had the good fortune to talk to somebody who had flown with these folks a little bit. Their word for them was the ones who don't talk, because they're very quiet, they're very business focused, and they emulate their customers. They emulate Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, who are very mission focused and don't talk to the public at all. So these guys don't talk to the public either, or to other units that aren't special operations forces. They have a lot of clearance, a lot of top secret missions that they handle. So they have to be very careful of what they say for the rest of their lives. There's a certain point where I just go in and make it up. I go, okay, does this seem likely based on what I know? Here's what the 101st Airborne does. That's pretty easy to find out. They're talking about their normal white operations missions all the time. And so what's the thing that they wouldn't be talking about? What are the kind of missions they can't talk about? And then what I did was I created this thing that I called the Black on Black, that I have no idea if it's real, but it's the missions that nobody can know about, that basically anybody outside the operation you're on, you lie to. Doesn't matter if it's the president, the courts, your commander, because it's so secret that it's basically eyes only. If you weren't there, you can't know about it. And that let me have a lot of flexibility in writing the stories, but I wanted to keep it real so that it was believable. And I think the key to that was getting the important stuff right. And I'm not talking about the machines. I spent a lot of time figuring out the helicopters, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But the really important stuff is the attitude of these people. And I read a lot of memoir from a lot of different um, groups of the military, a lot of different divisions and branches of service and so on. Uh, and I wanted to get the attitude right and what they care about. They're not there for king and country. They're there as a career. They are there for their team. They are, and I finally knew I got it when one day uh, somebody came into a bookseller friend of mine and was looking for some kind of an interesting book, and my friend handed him book number one of the Night Stalkers. And he was on vacation. It was out on the Oregon coast. The guy came back in the next day and he bought the rest of the series. And he said, yeah, I tried to be this good and I didn't make it. He got that right. And I think that was the important thing. I got their excellence and their desire for excellence and their dedication and their teamwork right. And I've since had people within the Night Stalkers um, let me know that I got it close enough that they can overlook the technical stuff that I just don't know, or the language I didn't use right, which I think is probably the biggest issue. But I got that attitude, and that makes me very happy. So let's talk about their very cool machines. And the Night Stalkers took three basic helicopter platforms and they said, we're going to make this ours. We're going to really rethink these things and have them rebuilt in our image. And their three helicopters are called the Little Bird, the Chinook, and the Black Hawk or Dap Hawk. And I'm just going to give you a little peek behind each one. The Little Bird is truly little. You can either fit 4 people inside, rubbing shoulders literally, or you can fit 2 inside and a lot of ammunition, like the one in the middle has the big guns out on the side. Well, those are rockets, but they can also hang big guns off those points. You can see them just inboard of the rocket. You can kind of see the muzzle of one. And there are big cans of ammunition that sit in the back seat. So you have 2 pilots inside. Or what they can do is they can fly along and they carry soldiers like Delta Force and so on outside benches, and they can duck into very small places. These are very small helicopters, and everybody can jump off, or they can go down ropes, fast ropes, like you can see in the left-hand picture. And they can get people in and out very quickly, and that's their specialty. They can get into narrow spaces. They're very small, very fast little helicopters. The Chinook is the big workhorse. It actually has a couple of gunners aboard, so it doesn't have a lot of weaponry, but it can lift 10 tons. So it can deliver 30 troops at a time. It can pick up a boat and drag it along with people aboard and deliver it wherever they need to. These are very long-range machines. They can fly 8 hours in and 8 hours back out. And then they have a refueling probe that you can see sticking out of the front and do a mid-air refueling so they can keep going. They're really incredibly tough, too. And then there's this beast. And this is the one that actually inspired all of my stories. And it's called the Dap Hawk. And they have Black Hawks for transport. And those have a couple of miniguns that run by the crew chiefs, but they're really mostly about moving 10 to 15 people at a time. The Dap Hawk doesn't move anybody. It has 2 pilots, 2 crew, but it's probably the most advanced helicopter in the air. It's designed specifically by the Night Stalkers for the Night Stalkers. It's a complete rebuild on a Black Hawk. It not only carries a huge amount of weapons, as you can see on those side wings, it also, if you look, you can see just along the edge of the hull, right under the wing, you can see 2 miniguns that are run by the crew from inside. but it also has an immense amount of electronics. So it lets them fly what's called nap of Earth. So they can fly at 10 or 15 feet above the Earth at speed, at a level where you literally need to go up and over barns and around telephone poles and watch out for haystacks. I mean, they can fly at almost 200 miles an hour, that low. So they're way below radar and very, very fast. But they also have other electronics that let things like, if you shoot at a Daphhawk, it will track where the bullet came from and feed back to the gunners. Oh, you've just been fired at from right there. And they can turn and fire back along that line and shoot any aggressor as they were firing at them. And that's just the stuff we know about. They have immense amounts of equipment in there. One of the jokes is they're so heavy they literally can't carry anyone else. I stretched that a little bit, and every now and then they have to pick up and save somebody. But for the most part, the Daphhawk it's a pure weapons platform on steroids. So what was the series plan behind the Night Stalkers? Well, I decided I was going to write there are 4 seats in a Daphhawk. So I wrote about the pilot, the co-pilot, and 2 of the crew. And then there are 2 pilot seats in an MH6 Little Bird. So that was 2 more novels. I wrote about each of the pilots. And then the Chinook has 5 seats, but there's only 1 novel in that series, By Break of Day. And what happened was, after that novel, I was leaving my traditional publisher. But they were moving very slowly, like traditional publishers do. So they're releasing a book every 2 years. Actually, I force them down to every 6 months, but it takes them 2 years to do that release. Well, my fans were saying, can I have more Night Stalkers? Can I have more Night Stalkers? So while I was waiting for them to get around to releasing the 5th, 6th, and 7th title, I created a new series called the Night Stalk. My whole fictional world was the 5th Battalion D Company. So I created a new world, which was 5th Battalion E Company. And I wrote 4 more novels in their world. And so they became a fairly kind of separate series. But when I got all the rights back to the original 7, I put them together because they really belong together. And I ended up with the 11 books of the Night Stalkers. Is there a 12th? Yeah, I don't know. The characters are kind of asking for it. And so at this recording, there's only 11, but there's also 70 short stories. And there are other offshoot series. But the stories filled in, I had things like I had to fill in the Chinook crew. So there are stories about the crew. And that built novels about the Delta Force guys and novels about where Emily went after she left the Night Stalkers. And so it all just kept building and expanding until it's this whole universe that I call the Emily Beale universe. And you can find out more about that on my website. So this is the main series. And if you go to mlbuchman, that's with an H.com, I have books, newsletters. You can contact me if you have other questions. And under look for the link on the menu to Fan Club freebies. You'll have bonus scenes, stories, recipes from the book. I really tried to make it fun. And if you want something else, just ask. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.